Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler episode 77. Today the Amateur Traveler goes to Japan.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh no, 15-hour flight, oh, I don't think I'll ever be coming home. You know I love it. I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. I have three news stories for you today. The first one is probably the most controversial, and I'm interested to hear your feedback on this. In Orlando, Florida, a Massachusetts couple was flying with their 3-year-old daughter, and she refused to take her seat before takeoff. The airline officials say that the FAA regulations require the children aged 3 or above must have their own seat. After the flight was already delayed for 15 minutes, and in fairness to the other 112 passengers, according to an Air Trans spokesperson, they removed the family from the plane and they had to come back on a different route. So I'm interested to hear what you think about that. Obviously, there's a variety of opinions on that. The second news story for you today, if you are one of those people who does a lot of praying on flights, you might be interested in flying Israel Airlines, which now has introduced a Sky Torah. The Sky Torah is handwritten according to Jewish custom and provided by a professional Jewish scribe, especially for the airlines. And the airline says the Torah will enhance the prayers of those who are in the skies, praying in the closest place to God in the world. I'd say the part of the article that I found most interesting, and those of you who are Jewish already probably knew, is that a Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, must be written by a trained scribe called a sofer. A sofer must know that more than 4,000 Judaic laws before writing a Torah, which takes about a year. It's all handwritten. A single missing or misshapen letter invalidates the entire Torah. Wow. The third news story I have for you is the Department of Transportation has said to the new airline, Virgin America, that it cannot fly because it is in fact not American enough. Under U.S. law, a U.S. airline must be 75% owned or controlled by Americans. And the Department of Transportation says Virgin America does not meet that requirement. If you were looking forward to flying Virgin America, then you can support the airline by signing a petition at letvafly.com. I'll put that link, as well as all the other links to the articles, in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. Our guest today is Andrew from the site globechatting.com, which we'll talk about later in the show. I'd like to welcome to the show Andrew, who's come to talk to us about his experience in both traveling to as well as living and working in Japan. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So you spent how much time in Japan total?
In total, I spent 1 year in Japan.
You spent 1 year. And why going to Japan, and how did you arrange the whole thing?
Well, it's very interesting, actually, how I ended up in Japan. A friend of mine had left for Japan about a year and a half earlier, and his plan was just to stay for a year. And a year came and went, and he said he wasn't going anywhere. He was having such a great time. And then about 6 months later after that, he got in touch with me and said, you should really try this. For someone who loves to travel and looking for something completely different, Japan really has it all. And I gave it literally about a 2-minute thought, and then I said, yeah, you know what, maybe I should try this. It does look like a unique experience. So I got a 1-year leave, and I packed up my bags. I went to the Japanese embassy here at Toronto and found out what you need to do to go to Japan for a year.
And what do you need to do to go to Japan to get the visa necessary to do that?
Now, I know for Canadians, I would assume for Americans it's the same. It's not very difficult. Essentially what you do is you go down to the embassy and you get a working holiday visa, which I think is about a 3-month visa. It's interesting to note that they need you to show them that you have a certain amount of money on you as well. I don't quite remember the exact amount, but they really want to make sure people who are entering the country aren't coming with empty pockets.
Sure.
Explain that you're going for a working holiday. It's very easy. They're very open to having people from other countries come and work there. Essentially, to get something longer than 3 months, you can't do it unless you get hired by a professional company. And the best move to do is actually to do that in Japan, not to arrange it in your home country, because there are so many companies that are looking for English teachers, but a select few that actually advertise here in North America.
Now, you are a teacher by profession, but did you need any special certificate, accreditation, anything that would let you teach English there, or at least at the place that you wanted to go to and teach?
In fact, don't really need any. The majority of the places will want you to have some sort of degree after high school, albeit a college or university degree. It does not have to be an education. They just want some sort of bachelor's or something along those lines. In fact, when you get there, the majority of the companies will train you. Training sessions can be a week to 3 weeks. It's interesting, actually, because I worked for a very large company, and I was, I think, the only actual person who had a Bachelor of Education who is a teacher by profession.
I asked because I've looked into this actually for short-term teaching positions in some countries, because you can get 1 to 2 weeks even sometimes, but there often you needed a certificate that basically said that you had gone through English as a second language training.
Right, you don't need that. That's the TESOL training, and you do not need that for Japan. I'll be completely frank, it's conversational English. They don't really look at the grammar too intensely. A lot of the time, a lot of the very large schools focus on having teachers who they feel are entertaining. A lot of people who do take English lessons in Japan, I lived in Osaka, and a lot of people who take English lessons in Osaka are people who won't necessarily even use their English. They're taking it because it's a hobby, it's something to do, or they feel it's important to have English. But for some reason, they will never go anywhere where they will use their English. They will not. Some of them will use it to travel, but the truth is, they essentially told us, teach a lesson, but be entertaining as well.
Interesting. And so were you teaching mostly in the evenings for people who were working, and then you had your days free, or were you teaching during the day, or how did the schedule work out, and did you get much time then to see the country while you were there with that schedule?
I lived in the Kansai region, as I said, in Osaka, and it worked very well for me. The majority of the schools, the big companies, have you work shifts, usually from 3 in the afternoon till about 9 at night, so it gives you all day to do things, and then you can even go out during the evenings after, as long as you're home, on the subway and trains by midnight, because all the trains in Osaka close at midnight, and taking a taxi is very expensive. So if you get stuck in the city, you're up all night, which is it's a lot of fun actually, but it could get quite tiresome at times. I got an opportunity to go through the whole Kansai area, which is Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe. I did have the opportunity also to go to Tokyo, but I stayed pretty much in the Kansai region, places like Nara and Mino as well.
And what was the highlight of the trip for you?
It's a tough call to choose one thing that was the highlight. Japan is
I won't limit you to one if you want to pick more than one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, the whole thing is an amazing place. It's an amazing. The whole country is an amazing place to go to. You have to leave a lot of your judgment at home because it really is very different than North America. And the truth is, when you first get there, you'll be in complete shock. And my suggestion to anyone going to Japan is just walk around the streets because the things you will see will amaze you. I had the opportunity to stay in a capsule hotel, which is essentially sleeping in the morgue. It felt very much like.
Now, when you say sleeping in a morgue, I'm not sure that everybody has the mental picture in their mind. You mean because of size and shape, not because of it's really cold, for instance.
Nothing to do with the temperature. It's essentially a room with drawers, human-sized drawers. Spend about $60 American, and that is your room for the night. You go, and it's mostly for businessmen who have had too much to drink and missed that last train home and now need a place to stay for the evening. But it's like sleeping in drawers, essentially. It is a very bizarre thing to imagine. It's your little cubicle, lying down cubicle with a television and a radio. Yeah. I had the opportunity to go to sumo and actually go to a baseball game. And the major areas of Kansai, the Kansai region. I had a great opportunity.
Now, when you go to a baseball game, you're from Toronto. You've got a baseball team.
Yeah.
So that sounds like, on the surface, something that you'd go there and that would be familiar.
Oh, it was amazing. Being from a great baseball city, I thought we appreciated our baseball. And actually, we went to go see a team. My friends and I went to go see a team called the Hanson Tigers, and it was the final game of the season, and they were the worst team in the league that year. They actually became a lot better, but that year they happened to be the worst team. They had a guy on there named Shinjo who ended up playing for the New York Mets a year later, but this was essentially a game that meant absolutely nothing. It had no purpose whatsoever, and what we were greeted by were basically baseball-thirsty fans who were just loving every second of the baseball game, to the point where they had individual songs and chants and cheers for every player who was up to bat, and it was nonstop, the opening pitch to the ending pitch. I think the end of the game, the Tigers got blown out, yet the fans never let up once throughout the game. And I come from a city where we won 2 World Series, and to me this was the same kind of excitement. And this was for a last place team for a game that meant absolutely nothing. So it was great experience. Great experience.
You talked about just walking around and the shock of things that are different. What other sort of things surprised you?
Japan, Osaka is full of shoten guys, essentially is what they're called. And essentially these are long outdoor strip malls that seem just to go on forever and ever and ever. And they're packed. There are just so many people walking in and out through them, going to all these stores. It's store after store after store of essentially the stuff that looks very similar as you keep on walking. A lot of shoe stores and a lot of 100-yen stores and a lot of video game arcades. And you actually...
now, 100-yen store is like a dollar store?
Exactly. It's exactly the thing.
What is the yen to dollar ratio?
It's about $1. It's about $1.
About $1,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty close. You walk into some of these stores and just there's so many lights, so loud, and so much going on. It's senses overload sometimes. It's really quite a sight to be seen. The video games, the arcades are just unbelievable. You walk into these 4 floors of video games, which are included even the novelty games in which you'd have the claw here in North America, the claw that picks up the toy, you know the one I'm referring to in the carnival.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there they have the claw, and you can win a live turtle from there. And they have a dance. Back then they had a dance step, which I don't think is as popular anymore, called para para. And para para essentially is dancing without moving your feet. And you'd go to these bars, and there would be people lined up doing the para para dance. And in the arcades they had para para paradise. Essentially it was you stand and there's sensors that pick up your hand movements and give you points if you do the para para dance correctly. And what was even funnier is you'd see businessmen doing the Para Para Paradise video game, but then behind them there would be more businessmen practicing for their turn to do Para Para Paradise as well. And the lineup would be 3 or 4 people deep. It was really quite humorous to see.
Now, did you speak Japanese before you went?
No. And to be honest, that I think is the hardest part. Japanese people are very shy when it comes to using English, and you have to learn to adapt pretty quickly. And it gets very frustrating at times. I went to get a cell phone, and I went with someone who spoke perfect Japanese, and the whole thing took about 15 minutes. But then when I went to end my cell phone the week before I left, it took literally, I went by myself, and it took 3 hours. It was the most painful thing I'd ever been through. It was that no one wanted to talk to me. They were all too nervous. I had a dictionary, and even one of them I found out spoke English, and it was still something that it was like pulling teeth. They put me on the phone with their switchboard, and the switchboard would constantly change me over to somebody else, and you got to have a lot of patience when you go to Japan and you're dealing with daily life and not speaking the language. Yeah.
You were able to get by okay in general, navigate, for instance, and you clearly didn't starve. And
definitely a different experience, and it takes a while to get used to it, and that's the reason why I think people who go, you need to go for a longer time than a few weeks. You need to really go for a couple of months to understand it. It's like seeing a movie. You can see a movie once, but you always notice more the second time. I think when you're there for a short time, you see of it, but it's so much of it, but it's so new and so shocking that you only scratch the surface. When you stay longer and you start to figure out things and how to get around and how to do things, you start to really understand a lot of things about the country. And some of the things are just amazing, and some of them are so different that they do pester you a bit, and they do shock you in a way that it's not so positive as well.
Like what?
A very good example is when you walk through the subway stations, the major subway stations of Umeda, for example. There are during evenings there are male hosts who are trying to attract women to come into their bars, and I'm not quite sure how the whole concept works, but essentially the way that they are trying to get these women to come to their bars and just drink, it's not a sexual thing, is by invading their personal space and what we would call harassment. Essentially they would follow them for a block right in their face saying, "Come to my bar," or saying different things in Japanese. And for us to see something like that, it's shocking to see that you have someone who could just literally invade someone else's personal space.
As you were in Japan for a while, what did you miss from here?
Well, to be honest, I knew I was only going to be there for a year. The majority of people who go to Japan stay longer than a year. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to take advantage of everything and not thinking too much about what I'm missing at home. I would have to say the one thing I did miss, and I guess this is more of a personal point of view, is a lot of people go to Japan to teach English, and I think different people go for different reasons, and you meet some very unique individuals while you are there, and you are a novelty to a lot of people when you get there in Japan. You become very quickly invited to places essentially because you're not a Japanese person, or people are very interested in meeting you. And I think a lot of, not a lot, but there's a fair bit of people who go to Japan to teach English end up, it goes to their head a little too much, and they start to believe that they are celebrities, and they take it for granted, or they're just not appreciative of what's going on, and they don't act in a way that I personally feel a person should when you're going to another person's country. Mm-hmm. Living in North America or living in your home city, you can go somewhere and it doesn't matter what you look like. People automatically assume you're American or Canadian for that matter. But in Japan, if you're not a Japanese person, people know right away that you are not from Japan.
Mm-hmm. Now, turning that around, now that you've been back and you spent a year there, what do you miss from Japan?
I think I miss waking up and going for a walk, and there's always going to be something new. I lived in a neighborhood, as I said, it was just actually outside of Osaka. It was a suburb of Osaka. And even though it was a smaller neighborhood, in the year that I was there, I think at least 3 or 4 days a week I would go for a long walk and discover new things that were a few kilometers away from where I lived. That to me was the greatest part, was doing that.
If someone doesn't have a year to spend in Japan, and they were going to go especially to the area where you spend a lot of time, what would you recommend they see?
I'd say that a lot of people would be so feeling, oh, I have to go see Tokyo, and I have to see Osaka. I think you can choose one or the other. I don't think if you're spending a limited amount of time that you need to necessarily see both. Because I lived in the Kansai region, I would highly recommend you just spend a few days walking around downtown Osaka and seeing all the different districts of Osaka, and then going to Kyoto and seeing all the temples. There are many, many temples, and they're beautiful, these temples up in Kyoto, and it's only an hour from Osaka. And then as well, there's Nara, which is an amazing park with some fantastic temples as well, and just wild deer all over the place. Tame wild deer that leave you alone as you just walk through the streets and go to the temples. And then obviously there's a lot of the cultural things that I would suggest going to. If you have the opportunity to go to sumo wrestling, you definitely have to go to sumo wrestling. And if you have the opportunity to go there during the cherry blossoms, and you should see that and just take advantage of all the cultural things that are going on around.
Now, you talked about the different areas in Osaka. What sort of areas are there, and which one should you see if you only had a week or two?
Well, areas such as Namba, the area where a lot of the nightlife takes place, is definitely a must-see for a lot of people. And then there's areas such as Umeda, the main Umeda station. Just the opportunity to go there and walk it, I'd say even at 8 in the morning, just to see people going to work, seeing how busy it is and how quiet it is with all these people who are on their way to work. Umeda Station. I mean, Umeda Station alone is this train station. You could spend the entire day just walking around. There's actually a grocery store, a very high-end grocery store in the basement of Umeda Station, in which watermelons, I think, are something around $160, if I remember correctly, and apples are somewhere like $7 to $10 a piece. And I never could quite get an answer of why they were so expensive. I asked many people, and the best answer I got was people like to present them as gifts. So I'm not sure what exactly that means, but yeah.
Now, I think of Japan as being a relatively expensive place to visit or to live. Is my perception correct that way, that it's a fairly high standard of living?
It is.
Fairly expensive standard of living? It
is. And that's another thing about, obviously, going there for short periods of time. You don't learn quickly the cheaper ways to do things. I mean, there are cheaper ways. There are cheaper grocery stores and things along those lines. And the longer you stay, you're going to figure those out. But you also have to keep in mind that the payment from the job, the salaries from the jobs are they work well with it. So if you're going there to teach English, it's going to be a struggle at first, but eventually it all catches up.
But you can get by without sleeping in a drawer here?
Well, you got to try sleeping in the drawer. Come on, you can't go to Japan without sleeping in it. But yeah, you can get by without doing that. It's all just investigating it and trying to find the right bargain.
And so what sort of things do you recommend for travelers, for instance, who won't be paid in yen a salary? Which parts of town, for instance, are a great place to get a less expensive dinner or less expensive entertainment?
Well, the downtown area, essentially, will give you everything. I mean, there is essentially street food, like what we have, and that will always be the cheapest choice. However, anything with a little upper scale is going to run you more money. Like it's almost unavoidable if you want to do dinner at a restaurant, or you want to do something entertaining, such as go see some sort of play or something like that. But that's the great thing about Japan, is that you don't necessarily have to go into places to pay to go enjoy the experience. just from walking around and going into the temples and getting lost in the streets, that is an experience all to itself.
You probably read up somewhat on guidebooks and such before you went over. Anything that they really said was a must-see and you thought it just wasn't worth the trouble?
The one thing I did not go see, and I was planning on seeing, was Mount Fuji. And I had planned on...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I had planned on seeing Mount Fuji. And then, I'd say a couple weeks before, I was reading an article from Ian Wright. It was on his list of top 10 disappointments. And so when I got there, I asked some people about it, and the majority of them said, it's really not worth it. It's an expensive endeavor, and once you get there, you're just met with hordes of people and not a whole lot of scenery. I chose not to do it. I mean, I don't know from personal experience, but I would tell anyone from what I've heard that Mount Fuji is not necessarily worth it.
How about on the flip side, anything that you wouldn't know about unless you had spent time with the locals, but is a must-see that you would tell a friend who went to Japan, you've got to do this? Wouldn't find it in the guidebooks.
That's a great question. I guess it's all what you really want out of your trip. For me, that time of my life, I would say for anyone, if you have the opportunity to go out on a Friday night and just say, I'm going to miss the last train back, and go to a local establishment, and actually go to all the different local establishments, because essentially they have apartment buildings. It looks like apartment buildings that are just bars that offer different types of nightlife, such as karaoke and themed bars, and just spend the evening hopping from one to another. You're really in for an interesting, let's just say it's nothing like any bar hopping you've ever done in North America during your college days or anything along those lines.
And nothing like it in what way?
You go to these buildings, as I said, and you think to yourself, oh, it's just a regular office building. And then you go up the stairs. The first thing you notice are the beer machines, like the machines that are that offer you a variety of drinks, including coffee in a can, but beer vending machines outside the bar.
In the bar?
No, this is outside the bar on your way to the bar. And then and then when you go inside the bar, essentially it's a place that I would say is like maybe 500 square feet, if that, and packed with locals. And then you exit and walk down the hallway to another one. It's like a condo of bars, a co-op of bars, I should say. Yeah.
Interesting. Any one thing you fell in love with the culture?
Yes, the honesty. Actually, there's so many funny stories I could say just that are coming to the top of my head now as we talk about this. But the honesty that goes on in Japan is quite remarkable. I had purchased an expensive camera and I left it in a school bag on the train, and I remember getting home and realizing I'd left my bag on the train, and my roommate, who had already been in Japan for quite a while, said, don't worry, just go to the train company and they'll have the bag. And the next day I went to the train company, and sure enough my bag was there intact with with the expensive camera in it. And when I told my students about this, they looked at me as if why should I be shocked about this? Of course it was going to get returned. That's the way things are. And I've heard stories about people who would lose their wallets and they were mailed back to them with everything in them. So the honesty is quite amazing. But then on the flip side, at times it also can go against you. I was in a situation once where I was essentially 1 penny, equivalent to 1 penny short of the amount of money needed to buy something, and they wouldn't give it to me because I didn't have that 1 penny, whereas here that's obviously someone would wave that off very quickly.
Interesting.
And in fact, actually, at times I took advantage of that using my I called myself the ignorant Canadian, but when I went to go see sumo wrestling, we were there earlier in the day. The majority of the crowd comes later in the day to see sumo. Sumo's an all-day affair, and I wasn't aware.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's actually it's something that happens seasonal, and it's an all-day affair. And I was under the assumption that if it was an all-day affair, then we're going to see very large gentlemen wrestling all day. I went with some friends early in the morning, and without realizing that the people who were just starting out in sumo were the first 2-3 hours, so essentially it was skinny people, skinny guys, wrestling. And I remember I went for a walk and I was with a Japanese person at the time and someone else, and Akebono was walking around. And who Akebono is he's the former sumo champ. He's essentially to sumo what Michael Jordan was to basketball. Mm-hmm. And I, of course, didn't know who he was other than the fact that he was this enormous man in a suit. And the person I was with explained who he was to me, and I didn't even think twice. I said, I got to get a picture of Akebono and I. So to the Japanese people, that was shocking that I would actually invade someone's, this celebrity's space. Interesting that was shocking, but so I walked up to him. My Japanese, unfortunately, it's brutal. But I do know how to ask a question, but I didn't know how to say camera. So I said, photograph deska, and he looked at me, and I said it again, photograph deska. And he looked at me and he said, I speak English, and that's when I found out that Akebono was actually from Hawaii.
Right.
But he did pose for the picture, so.
I was going to say, isn't that the one from Hawaii? Yeah. But I didn't want to interrupt your story.
Yeah, so sometimes, you can use your Canadian root or North American rudeness to do things that Japanese people wouldn't dare do.
Funny. Well, I thank you very much for coming on the show, Andrew.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For telling us a little bit about Japan, and in a few minutes I'll ask you to tell us a little bit about another venture that you're doing, but thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And those of you who are listening to the iTunes enhanced version of the show, yes, that is a picture of Andrew and Akebono. And I've also put in a link to a story that he wrote on a travel blog site about another experience getting out and hiking in the woods near Osaka. I only have one website to offer you today in the Internet Resources portion of the show, and that's actually Andrew's website, which is Globe Chatting, and I'll let him explain it to you.
Okay. I have done quite a bit of traveling in my life, and a time came where I had to basically stop all my traveling and start living in the city of Toronto and work a job like most people, and pay a mortgage. And I decided, although I couldn't do as much traveling as I had done before, I wanted to create a community, an online community in which connects people internationally. And Globe Chatting essentially is that. It's an online community that allows people to meet people from all over the world, do some online chatting, pen pal services and such, and talk about things, and also give travel advice and travel tips and suggestions to things for people who are looking for international experiences, such as working in other countries and checking out different cities and such.
And that site again is globechatting.com. You may or may not know that there are two different ways to leave me voicemail. One is to call the voicemail number, which is 206-MOM-LOVE, and the other one is to go to the Amateur Traveler site, amateurtraveler.com, scroll down, and on the left-hand side you'll see a Mobitalk widget. And if you use that, you can leave a message if you have a computer with a microphone, just like Barbara did here.
Aloha, I just found your site today, Amateur Traveler, and love it. I went to my iTunes and I followed your instructions on how to subscribe through the iTunes store, but I couldn't find your podcast, Amateur Traveler. I even tried sorting by a name and clicking See All. Please help. I really want to put you on my iPod so I can listen when I'm walking my 4 miles. Aloha from the island of Kauai, and mahalo, thank you.
I've already communicated with Barbara and let her know how to solve her problem, but I thought I would communicate to the rest of you in case somebody else is looking to how to subscribe. Subscription can be used for any particular program which is a podcatcher. iTunes is the most common, and you don't even have to have an iPod to use iTunes, and it is a free program. And there are instructions which I have updated to make it a little easier. The easiest way to subscribe is to go to the Amateur Traveler site again. On the left-hand side is a button that says Subscribe in iTunes, or a link that says Subscribe in iTunes. Click that, and then click Subscribe, and you're subscribed. Then below that, there are some other instructions which show you how to see the iTunes enhanced version if you don't see it already. I hope that helps. Oh, and just for clarification, subscription is, and I plan for it always to be, free. I got a terrific email this week from Bridget, who writes to say, I just subscribed to your show. I'm a MacCast listener and have been busy downloading your back catalog. I just finished listening to the show on Yosemite, number 32, and really appreciated your take on Yosemite in the winter. I've just come back from a 5-week tour in the United States, and Yosemite was one of the must-see stops. Because I'm a university teacher in New Zealand, I only get to go on vacation over our long summer break, which is most of other people's winter. So I liked that you specifically point out that Yosemite in winter is beautiful. I felt a lot of time that people thought we were stupid going to national parks in wintertime, but I like it. I'm certainly never competing with big crowds. Anyway, Yosemite was amazing, beautiful, magical. We also went to a number of other national parks using the National Park Pass, Arches, Canyonlands, Mesa Verde, Grand Canyon, Montezuma's Castle, Canyon de Chelly, Joshua Trees, etc., etc. I'm currently planning a European cities trip for December of 07, London, Edinburgh, Dublin, Rome, Venice, Milan, Athens, Prague, Nice, Bordeaux, and Paris, and will listen carefully for some good tips on these places and maybe others. This show is great for a travel junkie like me, so thank you very much. And Bridget also sent a couple pictures, which I also appreciate, of them enjoying Yosemite in the winter. So thanks very much for writing me, Bridget, and making it seem like somebody listens. That's always appreciated. Thanks very much. There have been some interesting discussions this week in the discussion boards. I apologize that I won't be telling you about them. You'll have to go see them yourself. But this show has gone on too long, and I have been editing it for too long. Something went drastically wrong several hours ago, and I had to edit the show twice. It generally takes me about 6 hours to edit a show, so I'm about to put this one to bed. Instead of playing out with the theme song tonight, I'm going to leave you with a song from Tara-Leigh Cobble, who I've played on the show before and I just had a chance to see in concert. And I particularly enjoy her music, which is available on the PodSafe Music Network. If she's near you, I strongly encourage you to go see her in concert and listen to some more of this wonderful music. And thanks so much for listening.
Such a strange sensation, sudden lack of gravity. I cannot hold my balance when you're standing next to me. But I've got strength for bios against calendars and maps. And if you'll say it's worth it all,
The best and the brightest served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery, Podshow, and Limelight.